UFC 300 was never going to meet expectations. Now, before everybody comes back to this video after Alex Pereira versus Izzy 3, or Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall, or Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill, or Magomed Ankalaev gets announced, and everybody comes back to this video and calls this trash or aged like milk, something like that, let me just say, as of now, UFC 300 will guaranteed be a good card. I just want to quickly note that this was recorded before Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway was announced, so just keep that in mind while watching this video. At the time of this recording, UFC 300 has Arman Tsarukyan versus Charles Oliveira, Alexander Rakic versus Yuri Prochazka, Figgy versus Cody Garbrandt, Calvin Kattar versus Aljamain Sterling, and of course the cherry on top, Weili versus Yan Xiaonan. But in all seriousness, UFC 300 will be a good card, if not great. But considering a UFC event divisible by 100 only comes every 7 or 8 years, and the expectations of a legendary super event are so high, UFC 300, considering its circumstances, was never going to meet those expectations. So in this video, let's uncover those circumstances, those unexpected events, those injuries that barred UFC 300 from being a super legendary event, and how UFC events divisible by 100, or any event that's supposed to be hyped up as a super event this far in advance, will never meet expectations. So for UFC 300 to be a super event, you need superstars. But what happened to them all? So let's start off with the superstar, Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor facing Michael Chandler for UFC 300 made the most sense for everyone, as any event headlined by Conor is a super event, and Conor has been edging us with his return all last year. But apparently he needs more time to prepare or get the juice out of his system or something, because this fight ended up getting announced for International Fight Week on June 29th instead of April, when UFC 300 would start. As for actually active superstars, 2 of them are just busy. Volkanovski is set to fight Ilia Topuria in February, which is going to be a banger, but that just means it's probably going to be impossible for Volk to turn around and fight in April for UFC 300. Same goes for Sean O'Malley, who's set to fight Cheeto the month after in March, and of course would make it impossible for him to fight in UFC 300. As for a potential, maybe not super fight, but a huge fight at 185 nonetheless, Khamzat is still available, and him fighting for the belt would be huge, but considering that Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis are fighting this weekend, depending on how that fight goes, may give little turnaround time for the winner to fight Khamzat. And speaking of that event, a word from our sponsor. We've got a good one this weekend, folks. Live from Ontario, Sean Strickland will be in the octagon against Dricus du Plessis. Have you built your bet slips yet? I've partnered with DraftKings, and right now, new customers can take advantage of an amazing offer for the fights. All new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings app now, and don't forget to use my promo code TJLovesFights. That's right, new customers can bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets into your account instantly. Stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets on DraftKings Same Game Parlays for a shot at an even bigger payout. Combine multiple bets together from the same fight, including number of rounds and method of victory. If you're already signed up for DraftKings, no problem. All customers can get a no-sweat same-game parlay, or SGPX. Get a bonus bet back if your bet doesn't hit. Max reward limits apply. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the chance to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code TJLovesFights and bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code TJLovesFights only at DraftKings Sportsbook. As for the lightweight division, a division full of stars, Charles got booked for this card, which is good, but is against Arman, which is a good matchup, just not the super fight we were expecting. And another star in Dustin Poirier got booked for $299 against Benoit Saint-Denis, which is obviously great for $299, but another bummer for anything in UFC 300. Islam Makhachev, who I was really confident was going to face Justin Gaethje for the lightweight and technically BMF strap, is apparently injured, as Dana White, in the announcement of Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan, said that Islam is still recovering from some type of injury and can't be booked for 300. Also, I don't even think he fights during Ramadan based on what he has said in the past, so I don't think he was going to be available if he wasn't injured. Which still leaves Justin Gaethje available for UFC 300, however, we haven't heard any official word on who he's going to fight. I have a couple potential matchups for him that could save UFC 300 from being a complete disappointment, but again, no official word on that. As for more superstars that could headline any event and get the casuals going, Jon Jones is obviously still injured, so seeing him potentially face Tom Aspinall for undisputed heavyweight status still seems like a long ways away. As for Israel Adesanya, he's in God knows where right now. A couple months ago, Izzy said that he would be stepping away from the game and wouldn't be fighting until 2027, but then out of nowhere calls his fans restarted for believing in that statement, which did not make sense to me considering the way he left his fight with Sean and how sad he was post-fight. I mean, Izzy, you've said some things in the past that we didn't think we were supposed to take literally, and now we're the stupid ones for taking that literally. I don't know, but obviously a return from Izzy would make this event huge and possibly a super event. However, there's no telling what Izzy's going to do next, and there is no official word on his return. So as you can see from this myriad of previous bookings, bad timing, injuries, in regards to superstars, this card was never going to live up to expectations. But I'm here to say and explain that no card planned out that much in advance to be a banger is ever going to live up to expectations. Oftentimes, the best cards in the UFC are not planned out that far in advance, like a Super Bowl, an NBA Finals, or a World Cup. They're not that manufactured, and they oftentimes just happen due to the circumstances or the fighters that are available in that time around a month before the fight. Take the last banger of a card and definitely the card of the year last year, UFC 295. Just looking at the legendary main card alone, we had finishes across the board, starting with the best hair in the game, Diego Lopez, knocking out Pat Sabatini in round 1, Benoit Saint-Denis head kick assassinating Matt Frevola in round 1, Jessica Andrade getting to a boxing match and banger with Mackenzie Dern before ending her in round 2. Of course, Tom Aspinall getting the shocking KO over Sergey Pavlovich to be the interim heavyweight champ in round 1, and finally we had Alex Pereira finishing Yuri for double champ status. But the co-main and main that really made this card was never supposed to be there to begin with. Jon Jones versus Stipe was supposed to headline and be the main event. Yuri and Alex was the co-main, and Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich didn't even exist. But through injuries and late replacements came a significantly better card with Tom and Sergey at co-main and Yuri and Alex at the main card. And the card before this was even more of a disaster in terms of injuries and late replacements. Paulo Costa versus Hamzat was supposed to be the co-main, but that fell through when Paulo injured his shoulder and pulled out. Islam versus Charles 2 was supposed to be the main event before Charles busted up his head in sparring and pulled out. Thankfully, Volk and Kamaru stepped up last minute, but it just goes to show how main events can change in an instant. And this is the point I was trying to get to. Random pullouts, unexpected events, and injuries especially will always plague UFC cards. Because of this, cards are often planned out with the best fighters and best matchups available within that month usually, and planning out an event like UFC 300 to be a banger that far out in advance is practically impossible. Just look at what happened the last time the UFC tried to do this at UFC 200. First of all, they decided on an eyesore of a yellow mat for the cage, which is already strike one, but this was supposed to be headlined by the super fight and long anticipated rematch of Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier until Jon Jones popped 4 PEDs, and they ended up having to replace Jon Jones with a declining Anderson Silva, and this event had to be headlined by Miesha Tate and Amanda Nunes. And I think from Dana and the UFC's perspective, because of these unexpected events, random pullouts, and of course injuries, they would rather guarantee a fight right now than push back fights later to make a banger of a card like UFC 300. Because again, within that time span from now until UFC 300, there's always that risk of injuries and unexpected events. And from a fan perspective, I would much rather see a good card to a good card to a good card rather than a shitty card to a shitty card to an amazing card. So as you can see, getting a super stack card with all stars being uninjured, unbooked, and ready for one event is one thing, but getting them all aligned with a UFC 200, 300, or 400 card is practically impossible. So the real question is, what is the main event for UFC 300 so that it is more than just a good card? I think the obvious answer to me is for Alex Pereira to headline this event. He is the last superstar that I haven't mentioned, and as far as we know, he's uninjured, unbooked, and ready for UFC 300. And I know everyone wants him to fight Tom Aspinall, and he tweeted 30 plus 300 equals 3, which probably means he's gaining 30 pounds to fight at heavyweight at UFC 300 for his third belt, but I doubt Tom would give him that fight. there's no reason for Tom to risk his spot in line for the undisputed title besides money. I think the more realistic fight to make is Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill. There's so much to that fight in terms of story. Jamal would try to get his belt back after a long layoff, and Alex would try to beat the guy that beat the shit out of his brother in Glover Teixeira. Jamal also expressed coming back in the second quarter of the year, which would possibly mean UFC 300 in April, but he's still injured. And also, speaking of beating the shit out of brothers, he beat the shit out of his own brother too, so I don't know how that's going to affect anything in terms of his return. And then you also have the off chance that Izzy might be returning. There were rumors that Izzy would fight Khamzat in his return based on a tweet made by Khamzat, though there is no substance to that other than the Twitter call out. And Alex in his last fight said he was open to fighting Izzy at 205 for the trilogy in the UFC, but Izzy might call us restarted again for even thinking that, though of course that would be UFC 300 main event material. All I know is that we better get a good main event with a superstar fast, or there is a good possibility Bilal Muhammad versus Leon Edwards would be headlining, and nobody wants to see that. Anyways, what do you think about UFC 300? Is it possible for a legendary super banger of a card to even be made? And will UFC 300 be headlined by Leon Edwards versus Bilal, or will it be saved by Alex? Again, thank you guys for the support, and hopefully I fixed the audio sync on this format. Anyways, guys, see you in the next week. Peace.